Today is the beginning of the high school life of a young man named Ichika. However, instead of normal schools, he will have to attend a special girls' school, specializing in training pilots to fly cool armor called IS. Since IS was originally something only for girls, Ichika really didn't understand why he was able to drive this thing, only that he was now the center of attention in the class. Then, Ichika quickly realized that her childhood best friend Huki was also present. At the same time, the older sister Chifuyu has not seen for a long time suddenly becomes his homeroom teacher. As far as Ichika knows, IS is a type of armor with extremely destructive power. Therefore, it has been banned for military use, and is currently only used for sports competitions. In addition, Chifuyu is also the first Japanese pilot to have won the world championship in this subject. Struggling to pass the first class, Ichika had just entered the dorm room when she suddenly saw Huki coming out of the bathroom. The moment of confusion passed, Huki grabbed his sword and slashed at Ichika. Fortunately, he quickly ran out. The loud noise caused Ichika to be seen as a rare animal by the girls next door. So he begged Huki to let him in. Inside, Huki suddenly asked if Ichika had asked to be with her. Of course, Ichika immediately denied it, and Huki got mad again and continued to hit him. The next morning, Ichika was suddenly nominated by the boys in the class to be class president. This made a British student representative, Cecilia, feel displeased, so he challenged Ichika to a fight with IS, with the condition that whoever lost would have to fulfill a request of the winner. Originally, Ichika didn't want to be the class president either, but when she heard Cecilia say bad things about her country, Ichika accepted her challenge without hesitation. Right after that, Chifuyu also announced that the academy was preparing a dedicated IS kit for Ichika, making the students in the class all admire. People have such a reaction because there are only 467 types of IS in the world, all created by Dr. Tabane, Huki's older sister, corresponding to the number of armors allocated to the countries. So with such a small amount, it is very difficult to get a mass-produced IS set, let alone own a dedicated IS set that suits you. On the day of the match, Ichika donned the IS Byakushiki suit and glided inside the arena. However, he was quickly overwhelmed by Cecilia, due to her IS blue tears being the ranged form. Then, despite his best efforts, Ichika still could not avoid the rain of bombs and bullets coming from the opponent. Fortunately, at the most dangerous moment, Ichika's IS set had already completed the setting to get out of Shirokishi's form, allowing him not only to remain standing on the field, but also to gain enough speed to reach Cecilia. However, just as Ichika was about to deliver the decisive blow, he was suddenly adjudged for having let the IS defense stat drop to 0. Chifuyu then had to explain that Ichika was going to use a special skill. Use will draw defensive energy to increase attack power. Therefore, if it is not possible to balance this factor, it will lead to the case like the one just now. On the other hand, despite her luck of victory, Cecilia seems to have been mesmerized by Ichika's handsomeness and strength. Sometime after, Cecilia began to openly show interest in Ichika, even ceding the position of class president to him. But he didn't know anything. Only Huki sensed the danger. The next day, a female student from another class unexpectedly came to see Ichika. He immediately recognized it as Lingyan, another of his childhood friends. After talking for a while, Ichika learned that Lingyan is currently the class president of Class 2, and also the representative student of China. Seeing that the two of them were happily reviewing each other, Cecilia and Huki couldn't contain their jealousy, so they went to drag Ichika to practice. It wasn't until the two girls left that Lingyan went to meet Ichika in the changing room, and was very happy to be alone with him. After a while, Lingyan directly approached Huki to ask Huki to change her room. Of course Huki refused, and the two had a bit of a clash. Next, Lingyan suddenly mentioned the childhood promise with Ichika. But upon learning that he was only taking it literally, Lingyan gave Ichika a slap, then challenged him to next week's tournament. Because Lingyan's is also a melee type, right from the start, the two have a fiery clash with each other. However, due to only being in contact with IS, Ichika's level was still slightly behind the representative students, and was quickly shot away by Lingyan's cannon. At this moment, an unknown IS suddenly penetrated the barrier of the arena, forcing the two to work together to stop it, so that the students in the stands could flee. Through observation, Ichika noticed an unmanned machine in front of him, so he decided to use the special skill of the Yukihira sword in his hand, sacrificing his own defense to successfully take away one of his arms. At this time, Cecilia was also present to support from afar, creating conditions for Ichika to rush to kill the out-of-control ISIS Kia. Soon after, Cecilia and Huki also appeared one after the other, and the three of them fought for the right to take care of Ichika, causing him to really feel a headache. Ichika was absent from school, so Ichika stopped by his best friend Dan's house to play games. However, his sudden appearance made Dan's sister Ran seem a bit confused. After going downstairs, seeing Ran changed into another outfit, Ichika thought she was going on a date. That night, teacher Maya came to see Huki to move to another room. Huki, of course, he didn't want to. But it was Ichika's lack of sophistication that made her move away immediately. But then Huki suddenly returns, forcing Ichika to promise to agree to a date if she wins the individual tournament next month. The next day, Ichika's class suddenly has a transfer student from France named Charles. And because they are both boys, Ichika was assigned the task of helping this new friend. The strange thing is, when seeing Ichika changing clothes to prepare for the training ground, Charles suddenly had an unusual expression, when he seemed so embarrassed that his face turned red. The next day, their class welcomed a new transfer student from Germany, Laura. However, in the first meeting, Laura stepped down and slapped Ichika in the surprise of everyone. Not stopping there, when Ichika was training with Charles, Laura aggressively came to ask for a fight with him, while Ichika completely did not know when she offended this girl. It was only when Ichika accidentally overheard the conversation between Laura and Chifuyu that Ichika understood the reason why he was hated so much. It turned out that Laura had been trained by Chifuyu for a while, and she was a huge fan of Ichika's older sister. So when she learned that Chifuyu had to give up her chance to win the world championship to save her useless brother who was kidnapped, Laura decided that Ichika was Chifuyu's weak point that needed to be eliminated. Returning to the room, Ichika suddenly remembered that there was no shower gel in the bathroom, so he innocently brought it to Charles, and was immediately frozen by the hot body in front of him. So Charles is a girl pretending to be a boy. The atmosphere in the room after that was a bit awkward. Charles honestly said that because her family was lagging behind in the third generation as research race compared to other countries, Charles's father forced her to go to the academy to gather information about the academy. Ichika saying all this made Charles feel really relieved. She also apologizes for lying to Ichika and the others, and intends to return to her home country soon. But when Ichika learned that Charles would be imprisoned if he returned, he told Charles to stay at the academy at least until graduation. Because according to the law, no one can interfere with the students who are being trained here. The two were talking when suddenly Cecilia and Huki came over, so Ichika had to quickly drag them away, and Charles was lying in the room pretending to be sick. Moments later, Ichika returned with a delicious meal in hand. But since Charles couldn't use chopsticks, Ichika gently fed her, making Charles feel very happy. The rumor that the winner of the interclass tournament would be able to date Ichika put a lot of pressure on Huki, making her even more determined to win. Cecilia and Lingyan also did not want to miss this opportunity, so they worked hard at the training arena and coincidentally met there. The two were about to make a friendly match when Laura suddenly appeared with a coffee. Even arrogantly saying that they would take 1 against 2, Cecilia and Lingyan couldn't help but take action. However, Laura's confidence was well-founded. When she completely dominates the fight, she then tortures her opponent, forcing Ichika and Charles to break the barrier and rush to rescue the two girls. Finally, to avoid this going too far, Chifuyu appears to stop Laura and says, "Let's settle things in the upcoming tournament." Taking Cecilia and Lingyan to the infirmary, the group received news that the interclass tournament would have to compete in a pairing format. The girls all wanted to be Ichika and Charles's comrades, so the two of them paired up to avoid trouble. Nearing the day of the tournament, the academy started holding a random matchmaking draw for those who were still lonely. Ironically, the Huki was chosen to be paired with Laura, and their opponent was her team, Ichika. At the beginning of the match, realizing that Laura had no intention of cooperating, but only seeing her teammates as an obstacle, Ichika rushed to stop her so that Charles could remove the front stitch. As planned, relying on the superior strength of the specialized set on his body, it didn't take long for Charles to paralyze Huki's set, and then quickly return to assemble with Ichika. Then, taking advantage of Laura's special skill being ineffective against two targets at the same time, Ichika activated the second form of the Yukihira and then alternates with Charles to attack Laura, causing her to have to very hard to resist. However, just when Ichika had a chance to deliver the final slash, his set suddenly ran out of energy, causing the situation to quickly turn around. Fortunately, Charles was quick to lend Ichika a weapon to continue the strategy of alternating attacks, thereby enabling her to unleash the strongest blow to defeat Laura. Suddenly in this moment Laura suddenly remembered the past, when an elite warrior like her could not adapt well to and was considered a failed entity. After that, it was Chifuyu's appearance that changed everything, so Laura admired Chifuyu very much, and considered her as a role model for strength. Therefore, when she saw Chifuyu's gentle expression when talking about her brother, Laura couldn't accept Ichika's existence, let alone be defeated by him. This strange thought now enveloped Laura's entire mind, making her unable to control her armor and being swallowed by it. Finally created a clone with the exact same shape as Chifuyu's and instantly slashed Ichika away. Fortunately, Charles was there in time to give him more energy. Immediately restarting Yukihira's second form, Ichika gathered strength and charged forward to launch a slash, successfully freeing Laura from the darkness. Sometime later at the infirmary, Chifuyu said that Laura's condition was because hers contains a system that has long been banned. In addition, Chifuyu also advises Laura to stay true to herself, and not to try to be a copy of anyone. In the evening, teacher Maya excitedly informed Ichika and Charles that the academy had completed the construction of the boys' bathroom, and urged the two to go there to relax. The next day, Charles decided to reveal her real name Charlotte, as well as her gender, leading to Lingyan's jealousy, coming to the place to try Ichika. Suddenly, Laura was the one to stop Lingyan, then turned to give Ichika a kiss, and then announced that she would be his wife from now on. The next morning, Ichika woke up to find Laura sleeping next to him, making him extremely alarmed. Coincidentally at this moment when Huki entered the room and witnessed it all, Ichika immediately took a beating without even opening his mouth to explain. Moments later, Ichika and Charlotte go shopping for swimsuits to prepare for the school's upcoming beach trip. At the mall, worried that Charlotte would get lost, Ichika innocently held her hand without knowing that she was being watched by 3 jealous eyes. With her daughter's intuition, Charlotte quickly discovered Cecilia's group and dragged Ichika hide into the fitting room. However, the two were later discovered by Chifuyu. At the same time Laura was phoning back to Germany to ask her subordinates to help her choose a swimsuit. Finally came the day of the cruise. In the evening, when she returned to the hotel, Cecilia was about to go to Ichika's room to find Ichika, when she saw that the 4 girls were already there. Due to listening to strange sounds coming from inside, the 5 people slammed the door of the room and learned that Ichika was massaging Chifuyu. Chifuyu immediately advertises that Ichika has a very good massage skill, and asks Ichika to let the 5 girls try it out. The next day, the genius sister who invented Huki's Tabane, suddenly appeared. After that, he said goodbye to Ichika and ran to find his sister Huki. Right now Chifuyu is gathering all the people with dedicated as at the beach to prepare for the rehearsal. The strange thing is that Huki is also present even though she doesn't have one. It turned out that this time Tabane came to bring Huki the specialized is called a Katsubaki that she had made herself. According to Tabane, a Katsubaki is the 4th generation while the countries are only testing the 3rd generation, so it is understandable when it shows a strength and speed that completely surpasses that of the 3rd generation. Dominant. Suddenly at this moment Chifuyu received an A-rank mission, causing the drill to be immediately cancelled. Returning to the base, we learned that there was a 3rd generation as American and Israeli production called Gospel that lost control during the test run, and it is currently only about 2 kilometers from this place. Under the Academy's direction, the teachers would set up an encirclement barrier both in the air and at sea, and the fighting against Gospel would be handled by the dedicated as owners. However, after analyzing the technical indicators of the rebel the group concluded that only Ichika and Huki's could match it. Before the two set off, Tabane enlisted to show Huki how to use the unique skill of the 4th generation and she also associated this time with an event that happened 10 years ago. Accordingly, by the time Tabane officially announced about is a month after Tabane, 2341 missiles from many countries around the world had been hacked, and their targets were all directed to Japan. Later, based on the shape and color of the mysterious set, it was appropriately named the White Knight. Via satellite signal, Huki carried Ichika to cut Gospel's flight path, so that he could slash it with his second form activated Yukihira. However, what the two didn't expect was that even without a driver, Gospel could dodge Ichika's attack very smoothly. Faced with that unexpected situation, Huki immediately jumped to limit Gospel's movement, creating favorable conditions for Ichika to finish it off. However, at the decisive moment, Ichika discovered an illegal fishing boat very close to the battlefield, so he had to protect it and missed the opportunity that Huki worked hard to create. Huki is furious when he learns that Ichika broke the plan just to protect a bunch of criminals. But after being explained by Ichika, she was embarrassed by what she just said, so she revealed an opening for Gospel to attack. Without thinking much, Ichika immediately jumped to cover for Huki, then the two fell into the sea together. Rescued to the base, Ichika is severely injured and still in a coma, while Huki is extremely self-pitying after the defeat, and plans to never pilot an again. But it was Lingyan's slap as well as the encouragement of the other three girls that helped Huki regain his spirit to have the courage to stand up and fight again. That night, the 5 girls decided to act on their own without Chifuyu's permission. After Laura figured out Gospel's current location, the group immediately found it. Faced with the enemy who knocked Ichika unconscious, the 5 girls all tried to fight with all their might, but except for the power of Huki's forthas, the attacks of the others seemed to be useless. Too many effects. In a melee fight, Gospel grabbed Huki's 2 katanas and carried her high to prepare to counterattack, but with the unique skill Tabane had shown earlier, Huki succeeded in cutting it off. One of Gospel's wings caused it to fall into the sea. However, in just a moment, Gospel appeared again but was upgraded to a much more powerful Form 2 variant. At the same time, Ichika is meeting a white-haired girl in her dream, but before she can say anything, she disappears. The scene suddenly changed. The White Knight appeared in the sunset and asked Ichika if he wanted to receive power. Although surprised by this question, Ichika quickly answered yes, because he wanted to protect all the comrades by his side. Returning to the battlefield, the 5 girls were now completely crushed by Gospel's overwhelming power. Huki, who was on the verge of losing consciousness, only wished to see Ichika again, and immediately burst into tears when he saw a familiar figure appearing in front of him. With the Byakushiki set evolving into a Form 2 variant, Ichika was able to fight Gospel fairly. But due to the long fighting time, he was suffering from a lack of energy. Fortunately, Huki had found a way to activate the Akatsubaki's recovery skill before, so he was able to help Ichika continue to fight. In the end, in an attempt to hold off the girl's enemies, Ichika successfully pressed Gospel's head to the shore until it could no longer resist. Returning to base, 6 people were forced to write a review by Chifuyu for daring to defy the orders of their superiors. However, she also did not deny that they did a good job in this campaign. Suspecting that Tabane had intentionally interfered so that Ichika could fly as, Chifuyu went to her to ask about this. But Tabane only admits it was she who drove Gospel mad to give her sister Huki a grand debut. As for Ichika being able to control Byakushiki, Tabane himself didn't know why. In addition, the two's conversation also revealed an interesting information, that is, the core is used to make Ichika's Byakushiki set as the 001 core of the White Knight set. Meanwhile at another cliff, Ichika and Huki were sitting talking to each other. Huki still thinks that because of her, Ichika got injured and wants to be punished. If you find the video interesting, don't forget to click like, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below to support me. Thank you very much. See you in the next summary.